Welcome to another edition of Living with Purpose. Today I have Pradnya Desh, who really has had a fascinating career. She is an attorney, a former US diplomat. She is an entrepreneur where she has a company called Advocate AI, which provides tech-based legal services. She has just launched a campaign to run for the city council seat in Bellevue. She is a licensed attorney. She's practiced as a lawyer, and we're delighted to actually have a conversation with her. So please join me in welcoming Pradnya to Living with Purpose. Welcome.
Thank you. I'm really excited to have this conversation with you. I appreciate all that you do.
So take us through your journey, where you were born, why you went into this career, some seminal tidbits about your growing up, the family that you grew up in, and then I'll ask some other questions to prod you along.
Well, I grew up in a small town in the Deep South, and it was a town that I have to say really welcomed me. And I think the reason that it did that, my parents are both doctors, and they went to this town in Dublin, Georgia, as doctors in the community. And I think that everybody there knew that we were there to help. And so I grew up with really this mindset in a town in which no one else looked like us. We were there to help. And we, I think, pretty easily integrated into the community because of purpose, actually. And so I grew up watching members of the community supporting each other, even actually celebrating each other. We had this tiny town newspaper in which I would have to say either my sister or I were in it every other week. And then after that, I went to college in Atlanta. And I knew that I wanted to study international affairs because I knew that I wanted to go to law school. I knew that from a very young age. And so I went to Georgia Tech and studied international affairs. And one of the first few students in the new program that they had at Georgia Tech in international affairs.
So let me just go back to growing up. So your parents were immigrants, or?
My parents came from India and were immigrants that moved to New York a couple of years before I was born. And my dad likes to say that he's an import. And what he means by that is that at the time, the presidential administration was looking to increase the number of doctors within the United States and specifically went to recruit them at their hospitals in India. And so they came. He felt like the red carpet was actually rolled out for him at the time as new immigrants because they got a green card on the very first day that they landed in the United States under this program. And so
Which year was this in?
I guess they arrived in 1973.
Okay. So pretty early and very different environment than what we are doing with immigrants today.
Absolutely. Unrecognizable.
So they came into New York and then they decided to move to Georgia.
Via Colorado. They went after their medical program ended, they had to figure out somewhere in the country to be. And my dad found a job. He was looking for really any medical job whatsoever. But the only one that he found that was available was the chief of medicine in this small town in Colorado. And so there we were. He was a brand new doctor and he was leading the department. That was the job that was available. And so we went to a small town that was centered around a military base. And my parents served in the VA hospital for decades after that.
And in Georgia, they were in the VA hospital.
Exactly. They were transferred to the VA hospital.
Fantastic. And you studied in the public school system in the town?
I did. I studied in the public school system in the town. And I think I have to give a little plug for the public school system. Yeah. What I really liked about the public school system was a level playing field. We all showed up. We were all students. We were all within the same group. And what I liked is that I got to know people who were the sons and daughters of people from all walks of life because we were all classmates. And so it was important to my parents, actually, that we were in the public school system and so that we were around everybody else. I feel like I got a good start in life in being in the public school system and having friends from all walks of life.
Yeah, because my kids grew up obviously here, and all of them went through the public school system, which is kind of a little unique in today's day and time for the Indian immigrant community here, where most of our kids don't go into the public school system. But then, the school system here in the Lake Washington School District or the Bellevue School District, which our kids went to, is just fantastic in terms of the education that you get. So you went into the public school system. You have a sister, elder, younger?
Well, younger sister, who is now a doctor, and she's a eye surgeon, actually, ophthalmologist for children. And so she followed in the footsteps of my parents. Was maybe even expected, right? Is that my parents were both doctors and that we would be doctors as well. I was kind of a black sheep by wanting to do something else, but I think we had a really peaceful childhood in this small town in the Deep South. And I had no idea until much later how unique that might have been.
Yeah. And so you go to Georgia Tech, you do your international studies, and that then led you to serve in the State Department as a diplomat. Is that how that happened? Or you went into law school right after?
Oh, no. Yeah, there were a few steps between that. So I went to Georgia Tech. And at Georgia Tech at a career fair, I got recruited as an economic analyst. So I also did a master's in economics at the time. I stayed for a master's, and then I got recruited into the U.S. government to move up to Washington, D.C. and analyze economic policy. It was a fantastic first job for me because I got to continue studying. And that was what the job was, to study, to write reports that the president and the cabinet read. And so I did that for a few years, and I realized that while I really loved studying policy, what I wanted to do was make policy. And so I then took the Foreign Service exam while working as an economic analyst, and then worked my way through the system and became a Foreign Service officer in the U.S. State Department.
And this was what time frame?
This was early 20s still. So
yeah.
I was still quite young to do this. And really already even writing reports that the president read, I was thrilled. Anytime. I once got the feedback that President Clinton kept a pie chart that I made. And that was just, I still to this day felt a swell of pride that he read my pie chart and liked it. And so this was still early 20s.
Yeah, I love that. So you go into the Foreign Service and you're serving in the State Department in D.C., and then you decided that you wanted to become an attorney.
It was, again, because of what I was doing. So I was writing about international economics and specifically international trade, hot topic lately. So I was writing about international trade, and I knew that if I wanted to make policies around it, I thought I could be better served to go to law school and actually be out in front rather than in back, right, analyzing. And so at this time, I took the Foreign Service exam and then immediately started law school because it takes about 2 years to go through the entire process, and law school takes 3 years. And so while still working as an economic analyst, I went to law school at the same time. And by the end of it, I had a very fantastic first diplomatic posting. Right out of graduation, I got to go to Geneva, Switzerland, to negotiate tariffs at the World Trade Organization.
That's fantastic. So talk a little bit about that experience. I mean, Geneva, Switzerland, somebody in their 20s, I'm assuming still. How was that?
It was amazing. So I have to say, what was the best part of being in Geneva at the World Trade Organization as a U.S. representative is that I felt like we had moral clarity. I actually felt like the reason that we were there was to bring prosperity, yes, to the people in the United States, but people all over the world, because we were arguing based on sound economic policy to lower barriers, to lower tariffs all over the world, which we knew would lower prices, and lowered prices brings access. It brings affordability to people. And so I loved doing it just because of why we were doing it. And we were doing it to bring access.
And then what brought you back from Geneva? Well, why did you come back? Let me ask.
Yes. So what brought me back was a third child. In that time, like late 20s now, we're getting to 30, is that we had our third baby, and the role in the U.S. State Department is to move rather frequently, every 2 to 3 years. And I had done shorter tours 1 month at a time before landing in Switzerland. But I wasn't ready with 3 kids in tow to continue moving every 2 to 3 years. And so we came back, landed in Seattle, thinking that we would be here maybe for 2 to 3 years at the most, and then just got comfortable. So I asked to skip 1 tour as a diplomat. And then at the end of 3 years, I would have to come back. But at the end of 3 years, I had a 3-year-old and decided not to come back and stay in the Seattle area, and really saw some ways that I could continue the work that I was doing as a diplomat right in the Seattle area.
So you moved with the State Department as a posting to Seattle?
No, I moved as the State Department sent me here, but it's called home leave. So I was sent here, took the 3 years off, and the next would have been a posting.
Okay. Why did you choose Seattle?
It was random chance. This was a long time ago. This was 2008. So in 2008, since I was planning to take a couple of years off because the kids were really small, I asked my husband to figure it out. So look all around the world, figure out where you want to go. And in 2008, at the time we were in a recession without yet admitting we were in a recession. It would be 6 months before we backwards revised the numbers in which the government said that we'd been in a recession all along. And he only got 3 job offers, and they were all in Seattle. So after having papered the world with resumes. And so I thought, I can live anywhere for 3 years. And after that, we're going to go back onto the track that I have set for myself. And so you might almost say that why at first we ended up in Seattle was that it was a game of musical chairs, and the music stopped, and this is where we ended up. And then this is where we stayed.
There you go. So your training spouse, you decide this is where your husband's job landed you. And you made a phenomenal contribution into the community since you've been here since 2008. And talk a little bit about that journey. So now you've taken time off and you've now decided that you're going to come back into the workforce. And what transpired there?
I am an international trade attorney. And so what made sense was to start an international trade law firm. Yeah. And so that's what I did right in Bellevue. I started an international trade law firm, and really brought the worldview from having worked in negotiating tariffs and negotiating barriers internationally into the work with individual clients here in the Seattle area. And I found some things that really surprised me about the law and about access. And that's that in working at a policy level, you're at the 10,000-foot level, you see in general trends. But what I didn't see before was how it affected individual people and individual companies. Right. And what I saw shocked me, actually. And what I saw is that everybody who needs access to the law cannot afford access to the law.
Yeah.
Right. And the law is fundamentally about creating a society in which the rules are fair and everyone has opportunity. And that if people are priced out of law, then that is not the society that we have. And so in building a law firm, I saw this fundamental problem that I couldn't look away from.
And so talk a little bit about your practice, right? And then that practice morphed more into a technology-based service. So just take us about that journey. And then you now serve on the board as a board of trustee at Bellevue College. And how did that transpire, right? You're the vice chair. So give us a little bit about both the work that you were doing and the community engagement that you started.
In the firm, we worked with a few very large companies, and we also worked with a lot of tech startups. And so we helped tech startups. We helped them manage their international matters, but the firm expanded to more attorneys such that we were helping them with business corporate work as well as their technology law. And that's, again, where the access time and time again kept coming up is that, yes, we need a lot. We can afford a little. What can you do? And so I started volunteering with a legal clinic. And I started also, maybe on the mom side of things, or the mom skills, is that I started tutoring kids in the community. And so I started working with middle schoolers and elementary schoolers, just helping them with their homework through a program that we have in Bellevue through Jubilee Reach, and working, just helping them with their math homework, helping them with their essays, because as we know, education brings access. And in fact, it's a great equalizer, is that people from all walks of life, as they become more educated and are exposed to more ideas and learn new skills, can bring themselves out of poverty. And I got to see that firsthand through the children, people in our community that is in fact a very wealthy community, but the children had difficult circumstances and their parents often couldn't help them with their homework. And so that work felt really meaningful to me. Volunteering with kids, the same as I told my kids to make sure to get your homework done by 5 o'clock or else. I got to do that, and the opportunity to do that with other people's kids. But in doing that, I realized that while law is an important aspect to bringing access to others, education is as important or more, because law are the rules through which we operate, and education are the tools and the skills that we bring. And so I was asked to be on the board of trustees for Bellevue College, because I think I probably spoke at some point in front of a group about how important education was. And so Governor Inslee appointed me to the board of trustees at Bellevue College, bring this community focus to the governance of the college. And that this past year, I've been the vice chair. And starting July 1st, I'm going to be the chair of the board of trustees of Bellevue College.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Awesome.
Thank you.
And you have a company you run, you do volunteer work in the community, you're going to be chair of the board of a college, trustee, and you've decided to run for a local election. But what was actually very interesting when you and I talked was not just you wanted to serve locally, but you actually want to serve nationally.
I definitely do.
And that's what kind of excited me in terms of how are you juggling all of these things? So talk a little bit about how you see yourself wanting to show up in the future that you want to see.
To me, I'm really driven by wanting to create a level playing field. And so those are the opportunities that I say yes to. And I realize now I didn't actually talk about the tech startup, which is what I'm doing now. I skipped right over that. Is that in the law firm, I realized that we could have impact on the people we were working with. But those were actually only the people who could afford our services. And there's simply a rate limit as to how much one person can work with another individual person. And so I started a tech startup to address that problem. Can we combine tech and law to bring access to more people in an affordable way? And with the company, with Advocat, it is business law to help entrepreneurs access the legal services that they need using AI. And so that was, again, just to bring access and bring affordability. And so I think that's how really is to figure out a way to scale the impact that I'm having. I did that for the law firm. I started a tech startup to scale the impact that I was having. And for government, I'm running for city council to scale the impact that I'm having as a trustee in education. And eventually I plan to run for national office exactly for the same reason, to scale the impact. Because one thing that I've picked up in this journey is a startup founder's mindset. And I love that that's been part of the journey. A startup founder looks at the world in a really different way than I used to whenever I was purely in policy. And what you do as a startup founder is you try to deeply understand the problem. And then after you understand that, you don't do it too long. You understand, and then you go. You test, you iterate, and you constantly improve. And that's something I think is really missing from government and policy, is that government moves too slow. And when it moves too slow, we're missing out on solving the problem that's right there in front of us.
Now, one may argue that a government is not a startup, and a government needs to be thoughtful and responsive because it is actually dealing with far more complex challenges and has to address the needs equitably across all segments of society. Startup has a very different mindset simply because it is really picking a point in time and trying to address that. So given your experience, right, I mean, you have spent time in the government. You've actually seen government function. You talk so proudly of the work that you did to shape policy. how are you marrying the two? Or how do you think you can marry the two?
Yes, good question. I think already am doing it within the Board of Trustees at Bellevue College, but you're right to expand that out to the city because it's a really important point. So the best startups don't skip over the step of trying to understand the problem because if what we do is we move so fast without any understanding of the various tensions and the reason why a problem exists, you won't do well as a startup and you definitely won't do well in policy. And so we can't skip over the step of studying and understanding the problem. But if we stay in that step too long and we're paralyzed, you don't solve the problem. Studying by itself doesn't solve the problem. It's studying and then acting that solves the problem. And that's how I plan to marry the two. Study the problem as deeply as we can, test what we can in a way that doesn't harm people, right? Is that I think that this idea of small tests that comes from the startup world is something that could be really effective in the government. I think that often in the government, there are a few reasons why the government moves slow. And sometimes one of the things I think that policies won't admit is one reason that we move slow is because we don't want to do whatever it is that we are being driven to do. And so if it takes 20 years to study a problem, come up with a plan, start to execute the plan, how urgent and how important did that policymaker really think it was? They're no longer in office likely by that time. And so we need to identify when we're in situations like that and when we're in situations that simply need a deep amount of study and then action. And so I really argue to bring a much more action-oriented bias to government policy, but I'm definitely not arguing skipping over the step of study.
I love how you kind of frame this. We'll run out of time very quickly, and I want to kind of turn towards purpose and the importance of purpose. And why do you think purpose is important for everybody and everything we do? And how did you find your purpose and how has that allowed you to overcome challenges?
I think that purpose is what tells us what we say yes to. We're often provided with many different ideas and opportunities. And what are those opportunities that we decide to pursue? And what are those opportunities that we decide that we don't have time to pursue? And so it's really the purpose that guides us. And for me, it's leveling a playing field and creating access for us. That is, to me, the through line through my career and through my life that I would like to continue to do to work to level the playing field. And so our purpose is what allows us to, whenever presented with options that seem, maybe many of them seem just as good as the others, how do we choose between them? Is that we go back to our purpose, is that which one of these will help to level the playing field for me at least, and which one of these will create access for others? And that's how I choose.
I just want to kind of reiterate, right? That purpose allows you to choose.
Yes.
And purpose is within you, so it comes from a much more deeper place than just a rational approach to saying yes or no.
Yes.
And that's an interesting distinction because clearly you said a yes to a lot of things. I say a yes to a lot of things. And then it lands us in trouble in some ways.
It can.
So let's end with you sharing your one golden nugget, a piece of wisdom that you want to share with our listeners.
I'm going to bring it back to law because I'm a lawyer. The law is about fundamentally creating a society in which the rules are fair and everyone has access. And we're not there yet. We have more work to do.
So access for all and fairness is really what drives you, and that what gives you the energy to continue to do what you're doing today and the number of things that you're involved in. To our listeners, purpose is that renewable source of energy that continues to power humanity forward. It's a choice. It gives you the ability to decide what you want to be involved in. And it also allows you to create a sense of fairness and access. And for those of you that are in this community, in this town, in the Seattle area, please check out her campaign and support her if you wish to. I think she's just going to be a great addition to people that we want that can actually serve the community in a fresh, new way. So with that, Pradnya, thank you so very much for being part of the podcast.
Thank you.